So I'm a communicator. I stand in front of crowds of people and I talk. So I'm always aware when people talk well or speak well in front of people. I'm always aware when people are losing people. I'm always aware when you are falling asleep because I can see it, right? I look up here. I'm a communicator. I stand in front of people and speak all the time. The best speeches, the greatest moments in history of mankind are recorded and just kind of constantly repeated, aren't they? I mean, I think back over great speeches. I think over the videos I've seen of President Kennedy saying, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. Moments like that shape the direction of thought, you know? I think back when I was a kid, I had to memorize the beginning of the Gettysburg Address 407 years ago, and I don't remember the rest, but it was huge. It was super influential, right? It's one of those things that has to be embedded in our mind because it's so great a change in direction. I'm sure that every one of you think of one of the great speeches of all time came from Dr. Martin Luther King addressing 250,000 people crying out together for civil rights. And he stands on the National Mall in front of the Lincoln Memorial and he gives the I Have a Dream speech. You know what I didn't know about that speech is that speech planned to give by Dr. King was not going very well. And that he had planned an entirely different speech. And he got to the place and people around him realized that the speech was not having the desired effect on the crowd. They were all there for the same reason, crying out for the same civil rights, but the speech was kind of falling flat. And so one singer that was close to Dr. King shouted out to him, Mahalia Jackson shouted out, tell him about the dream. And so he decided, knowing it wasn't going very well, to say, I have a dream. Man, and the whole crowd turned on its ear. In fact, all of time turned on its ear. All of a sudden, an entirely different narrative could be dreamt of or thought of because of one speech. But the greatest talk, the greatest speech, the greatest moment in verbal history throughout all of mankind, undoubtedly, right? From every vantage point on every side of the coin, in every position, nobody argues with the most influential talk of all time was given by a Galilean carpenter to a group of people in the lands that we now call the Holy Lands. The person of Jesus Christ gave what we call the Sermon on the Mount. In fact, Harvey Cox, in his book, When Jesus Came to Harvard, he said the Sermon on the Mount is the most luminous, most influential, most contested, most studied, most quoted, most written about talk in the history of the human race. The words of Jesus have shaped the way thinkers think. They've shaped everything from followers of Jesus like you and I who want to find and follow Jesus and make a difference in our life. They've shaped the ways of the thinkers of communicators and of leaders throughout all of time. Even people that don't follow Jesus, like Mahatma Gandhi, used it to influence his soul force work. Because the writings, the work of Jesus in this moment, this time, is a huge deal. So let me just challenge you in this. If you're here today and you're holding the whole idea of faith and God and church and Jesus at arm's length, can I just say something to you? The words of Jesus and what we know as the Sermon on the Mount are phenomenal shapers of life. In fact, Dallas Willard says that they begin to answer some of the most profound questions that mankind asks. We call them the great questions, or he called them the great questions, that the words in the Sermon on the Mount answer, what is real? What can I count on in life? Who is living the good life, right? Who is a good person, and how do I become a good person? Even if you are here today and you're kind of investigating journey, you're investigating Jesus, you're thinking about church and God and faith and all these things. And maybe for a long time you've held this whole thing at arm's length. Can I tell you this? Matthew 5, 6, and 7 that contain the Sermon on the Mount, they can answer for you and for me all of these questions. What is really real? What can I really depend on in this world? We see all the riches and the stuff and the things, and we go, man, they got the good life. But then they see them run into court problems and issues and whatever, and then you're like, what really is the good life? And what makes a good person? And how do I become a good person? All of those questions are not just good questions, they are great questions. And they're not just great questions in their own right, they are the great questions. They are the questions that every one of us desperately want the answer to. What is real? What can I really depend on? What can I really count on in life? What is the good life really look like? How to become a good person? What is a good person? Those are things we all want to know deep within us, and we struggle to do it. So Jesus is well known for this moment. I'm going to challenge you, if you're here and you're not a follower of Jesus, could you dive into this with me? Because I believe these answers will emerge to you in the next couple of weeks, and you'll be like, oh, this is interesting to me. And you'll find out answers about Jesus and decide whether or not you want to give your life to him and follow him. But if you're here today and you're already a follower of Jesus and you're into this story, right? And you still want to find what is real and what can I count on and who's living the good life and what is a good person and how do I become one of those good people? Then can I just challenge you to this? Over the next few weeks, would you dive into the Sermon on the Mount with me? It's 3 chapters. Just read it over and over and over again over these few weeks. Become familiar with it. Immerse yourself in it. Because what it promises for us is not just the answers to these questions. It promises us what the whole story starts out with. Let me get to what I mean by that. Jesus is noticing that there's a crowd of people kind of gathered around him, right? And he's seeing around who these people are. They're the poor and the broken and the lame, the blind, all the people who are sick. And there's handfuls of those, as well as all the people who carry them and care for them and try to help them out. And all of these people, the broken and wounded and the people who care for them, want something significant from Jesus. And so he sits down, right? Pulls up a rock, I guess, right? And he sits down and he begins to teach them. And he says the words that start this whole thing out. Blessed. Let me stop there for a second. Blessed. Blessed is what he starts with. Blessed are those who, right? We've heard the Beatitudes. Maybe we'll talk about them in just a minute. But he starts with the word blessed or blessed. Can I just say this? If you're looking for more out of a relationship, of a real relationship with Jesus, blessed is what it really is. If you're looking for a way out of the problems that you're dealing with, blessing from God is what you need. Right? If you're in the middle of what seems like an insurmountable amount of pain, what do you need? God, just bless this situation, right? If you're in the middle trying to navigate something that's very difficult emotionally, physically, financially, legally, whatever it is, right? You're trying to navigate through it. What do you need? You need blessing. The Sermon on the Mount starts with the word blessed. Now, most of the time when we think about the Sermon on the Mount, we think about do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. Because we have what is exactly the opposite of the way that first century people would have heard the words that Jesus spoke. We hear them exactly the opposite. Here's what I mean by that. We have an idea in a setting like this where one person is talking and a bunch of people are listening, very much like when Jesus was talking and a bunch of people are listening. We think about it like this. We think about getting information from the jug into the mug, right? We think about, well, what do I have to say? You're going to put some slides up. You're going to make some points. You're going to make some information. Can I just point out to you that is exactly the opposite of the way that the people who were listening to Jesus would have heard that day. Because they didn't have like PowerPoint stuff, right? They didn't have talking points. They didn't have bullet points. They didn't know what a bullet point was, right? They didn't have an internet broadcast or a voice recorder. They didn't even have a notebook. They were sitting down, considering the life that they were living already, and then hearing his words and going, how do his words make a difference in my life? That's all they were doing. They were listening to him teach or talk about real life faith. And when they did, they heard him say these words. God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him. That's not talking about poverty, like not having stuff. God blesses those who are poor in spirit, another translation says. God blesses those who realize their need for him, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. God blesses those who mourn, for they'll be comforted. God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth. God blesses those who are hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied. This isn't about information. It's not a pump and dump. It's not getting information from the jug into the mug. It's these people looking for this word, God's blessing on their life. Now, we're going to talk more about these words in the next couple of weeks. In fact, next week, we're going to unpack some of those kind of leading into Mother's Day. But I don't want to miss how powerful these words are and the direction. It's really a vision for a life that Jesus wants for the people who are listening to him. But like any good talk, it doesn't stay with a vision. It doesn't stay in the I have a dream moment. It stays there, it begins there, and then it moves into real life practical things. Now, I got to be honest with you. Some of the things, because we have this tendency to think jug into mug, right, information, some of the things that Jesus says during the Sermon on the Mount can be a little weird. We're like, for real? That's how it's supposed to be? And to be honest, it's not just in the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus does that kind of thing. He does that thing regularly. In fact, this one's not in the Sermon on the Mount, but he says this. He says, when you put a luncheon on or a banquet, don't invite your friends, your brothers, your relatives, or your rich neighbors, for they will invite you back, and that will be your only reward. Instead, invite the poor, crippled, lame, and the blind. Then at the resurrection of the righteous, God will reward you for inviting those who could not repay you. Now, this is an interesting statement. Some of you are like, so what you're telling me is Jesus said I don't have to invite my relatives to dinner? I didn't even have any clue that I wanted to obey Jesus, right? Some of you are like, listen, I've been obeying Jesus for years and I'm going to keep doing it. I'm never inviting him again. Does that mean that you can't have the kids over for dinner? Does that mean that when your parents in town, you shouldn't have the rest of the family over? Does that mean when your sister flies in from another state that you shouldn't get everybody together and have a party? No, that's not what he's saying. He's just saying, he's challenging, this is important, the general prevailing assumption that you and I make in life. The general prevailing assumption is that if I do this, they'll repay me in this way. And he says that, like, instead, invite people who can't pay you back, the poor and the crippled and the blind and the lame, right? He's pointing out that we have a general prevailing assumption on how life works. Jesus is not trying to get information from the jug into the mug. Jesus is trying to get us to think differently, to challenge the way that we think about how life works, which is always what Jesus wants to do. Show us, help us discover a brand new way of living where we can figure out what is real in this life. What can I really count on? What is the good life that I want to live? What does a good person look like? And how do I become a good person? And so Jesus expands on all these things. Now, he does this over and over again. Words like this that if it, at face value can seem like, is that even accomplishable, right? Let's look at another one. He says, but I warn you, unless your righteousness is better than the righteousness of the teachers of the religious law and of the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, imagine, put yourself in 1 second. You're sitting, below Jesus. He's talking to you. And he says, unless your righteousness is better than one of the teachers of the law or the Pharisees, that you don't get to go to heaven. Now, if you're thinking about like the jug into the mug information, you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm not going to measure up. But that's not what they were thinking. They weren't thinking that because they weren't listening that way. They were hearing him say that the general prevailing assumption is that good works make you right with God. And it goes back, into the first words in this whole passage where he says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who are broken and recognize their need for God. He's saying, listen, if you're going to try and measure up, you're always going to fail to measure up. That's not what Jesus is saying. Look at it. Here's another one. He says, you have heard, your ancestors have told you, you must not murder. If you commit murder, you're subject to judgment. But if I say to you that if you're even angry with someone, you're subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you're in danger of being brought before the court. If you curse someone, you're in danger of the fires of hell. Okay, if Jesus is setting up a new standard of living here, I am in big trouble, right? Because what I would see in this, if I just took the pump and dump, like if I just took the jug into the mug information, all I see here is a standard that I can't live up to. Because I don't know about you, but I've been angry with people before. So according to this passage, I've murdered them. I don't know about you, but I've called people idiots. Some people in this room I've called idiots, right? And you are in danger of being brought before the court. If you curse someone, you're in danger of the fires of hell. Now, if you took this passage at face value, like it's just information to put into your head, and here's another standard of living that you have to live up to, then we got a problem, don't we? But what he's doing, yet again, is challenging the general prevailing assumption that you and I have in your life. The general prevailing assumption in our life, right, is that if I don't do the bad thing, then I'm all good. Remember what Jesus is doing? He's answering the great questions. What is true? What is real in this world? What can I really depend on? Who is living the good life? What is a good person? How do I become a good person? The general prevailing assumption in our world is that I'm a good person because I do good things. And what Jesus is pointing out is that every one of us are murderers. Every one of us are condemned. Every one of us have cursed and are in danger of the fire of hell. That good person doesn't exist. That the good person goes back again to Matthew 5, verse 3. God blesses those who are poor in spirit and realize their need for him. He's challenging the general prevailing assumption of what is good in this world. And it's not the only one. I mean, I wish it was the only one, don't you? I mean, I wish that was just it, right? All he said was don't murder, don't be angry with some folks, don't do this thing. I mean, we've all heard much more condemning parts of this whole story. How about this one? You've heard that the law says that punishment must match the injury. An eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth, but I say, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer them the other cheek also. If you are sued in court and your shirt is taken from you, give a coat too, right? If a soldier demands you carry his gear for a mile, carry it for 2 miles. Give those who ask, and don't turn away from those who want to borrow. Can I just point out that that's really hard to live out? I mean, it's almost impractical, isn't it? It's almost unrealistic to think about it. If you kind of just walk through it for a minute, you've heard all this stuff before, but if you've heard an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth, but Jesus says, don't resist an evil person. You should go toward them, right? If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer them the other cheek also. That's not easy. He goes on and he says, if you're sued in court and your shirt's taken from you, give him your coat too. If a soldier demands you that you carry his gear for a mile, you have to carry it too. So are you supposed to, if somebody makes you carry their stuff for a mile, do you have to force them to go 2 miles? Because Jesus said 2, I'm going 2 miles, right? Do you have a legalistic view of those things? Or can you realize that Jesus might be challenging the general prevailing assumption in your life and in mine? I gotta be honest with you, I have an easier time with some of them than other. That one in the middle, if someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer them the other cheek also. I gotta be honest with you, I don't have a pacifist bone in my body, right? I don't understand often the tension between fight or flight, because I always choose fight and I don't ever remember why there was a flight, right? I always choose confrontation. It's part of my personality and it comes natural to me. But can I just say this? Just because brokenness comes natural to me doesn't make it okay. That turn the other cheek thing is tough for me. It's really difficult for me. When somebody bows up and slaps me, right, I want to slap back. I'll turn the other cheek, but it's probably to kick a cheek, right? Like it's not about doing that. That's hard for me. I don't say that with pride. I really say that laughing at my own problem is that I don't have that pacifist bone. But just because it's natural doesn't mean it's okay. I need to tell you about something that has been going on, something that's happened, something that is happening in real time right now. As you already know, Journey has grown a lot in the last year and a half or so. I mean, we've grown a significant amount. But what that doesn't mean for us is that our staff does not sit in executive offices somewhere while other people do all the work. We are blessed with an amazing group of staff people. These people do everything from painting and cleaning to moving and building and doing random stuff all the time. So a couple of weeks ago, a couple Fridays ago, we were in the middle. I had about a 90-minute span where our framers were working out here in the back, and they needed some material brought over, and I needed to empty the trailer that was full of garbage, go get the material, and bring it back here. Just had like about a 90-minute opportunity for me to get it done. And so I took the trailer, went and got my wife's little SUV and drug it over to the dump station up here on Passmore Lane. I pulled up there and I started to unload it. The attendant came outside and he says to me, "You can't dump that here." And I said, "What do you mean I can't dump that here? We dump trash here every week." He goes, "We don't take trailers on the weekends." I said, "Well, it's not Friday. It's not the weekend. It's Friday." He says, "We don't take trailers on the weekends." I said, "Hey, can you tell me, is there a sign around here somewhere that says that to those of us who plan our time out and only have a narrow window that we shouldn't expect to bring our trash to the dump on Fridays because Fridays are part of the weekend and trailers aren't around on weekends?" And he said, "We don't take trailers on weekends." And I said, "Is there a sign?" He goes, "I'm the sign." That's where the wheels fell off my attitude, to be honest. I told him that if he was the sign that said no, then I could be the sign that said yes. And I said, "I'm going to dump this stuff in the dump right now. You just do what you got to do." And he said, "I'm going to call the police." And I said, "Well, guess you got to do what you got to do." And I was mad, so I threw all the trash into the dumpster, and I didn't get it all full in there. I took about half of it or so, and then I realized, hey, I'm not making friends here, so probably should get out of here. And so I got in the truck and left, and didn't really think much about it until Wednesday of that week after, when I got a call from the Jackson Police Department. And they asked me if I would meet him because he had a paper he needed to serve on me, and I showed up, and he told me that I was being charged with aggravated criminal littering. I didn't know that was a charge, aggravated criminal littering. Not a citation, not a ticket, not a fine, a criminal charge. It's a Class A misdemeanor. It is one step below a felony. And it results in my needing to go to the county courthouse this week and be fingerprinted and have a mugshot taken. I want to clarify a couple of things that didn't happen, okay? Because it's important for you to know what didn't happen. What didn't happen, I did not dump any garbage into that dumpster that wasn't always allowed in the dumpster. There was no construction materials, no commercial waste, no chemicals. There were no body parts, right? They were just garbage, cardboard boxes, an old garden hose, and some garbage bags. I didn't dump any unallowed trash. Also, what didn't happen is I didn't threaten him in any way. The word aggravated makes it sound like I threatened somebody or hurt somebody. I did not. I didn't threaten him. I didn't cuss at him. I didn't talk mean to him. I didn't talk about his mama or nobody else, right? I just simply did what I was doing. Aggravated is kind of the word because it's a larger amount of trash than 10 pounds. So I didn't do anything I shouldn't do. I didn't hurt anyone or threaten anyone. But can I tell you about the most important things that I didn't do? I didn't treat the man at the garbage station with respect and dignity. Other things I didn't do is I wasn't kind and compassionate. I didn't treat him the way I would want to be treated, part of what the Sermon on the Mount deals with. I didn't represent Jesus or Journey Church or my family very well. I embarrassed you and me and everybody else around here, right? And I am deeply sorry for that. Now, I wanted to tell you about that because I'd much rather you hear about it from me in this setting than learn about it on the Mugshots app or something else. So Tuesday of this week, I will surrender myself at the county courthouse. I'll be fingerprinted, have a mugshot. It'll be released into the public. And I didn't want you to not know what was going on. I did, however, call my friend Ronnie Coleman, who pastors Soul Quest Church down here. And if you've ever seen Ronnie, you'd recognize pretty quick. We get confused for each other a fair amount. We're both bald. We both have beards. We both wear thick glasses. And so I asked Ronnie if I could wear a Soul Quest shirt during my mugshot. He said he'd rather I didn't. You know, the truth is that I don't love having to tell you this stuff. I don't love being accused of this. I don't love being in this situation. But here's the crazy thing. It has allowed me the opportunity to see clearly that words like this are not true of me in my life. And it has allowed me the opportunity to challenge the general prevailing assumptions in my life, the real life things in my life that I struggle with. And can I just hope this is the case, that if this weird, terrible situation for me allows even one more person in this room to challenge the general prevailing assumptions of what makes a good person and how I become a good person, if it allows us even one opportunity, then I can see how God can make really good things out of really bad things. I've said it before, right? That every person in this room has parts of their story they wish they could do over or change. I say it all the time that I have parts of my story that I wish I could draw a box around and delete and forget they ever happened. This is one of those parts of my story. I wish that they were all in the past. But the truth is, the bottom line of where we're headed during this series is so good for my heart, so good for me. And I want to invite you to think for a moment about your biggest problems right now. Like, just consider them. And if it feels insurmountable to you, then Jesus has good news for you. If you need to understand or know that Jesus has good news for you, and the good news is probably not that your problems are going away. The good news is probably something much deeper and much better than that. Jesus is particularly close to those who have problems. He's particularly close to those who have problems. Now, if you don't have problems, Jesus wants to be close to you too. But Jesus' message is good news that available to those who have problems. Jesus' good news is available to those that the world thinks are beyond the reach of good news. The good news is available to you today if you will allow God to challenge the general prevailing assumptions in your life. Because here's the truth of the matter. The quality and direction of your life will be determined by your GPA. The greatest news is it's not your grade point average. It'll be determined by your general prevailing assumptions about what is real and what can be trusted and what is the good life and what makes a good person and how do I become one of those good people. Can I just challenge you in this passage of Scripture, this truth is challenging me in every imaginable way. I just want the good news that's available to those. And if you're here today and you're thinking about your biggest problem, can I just say this? If your biggest problem seems insurmountable, it is not your problems that are insurmountable. The insurmountable thing in your life is the love of God that is bigger and broader and deeper and wider and taller and stronger than all of the problems that you and I and everyone else has combined together. What is insurmountable is not your problems. What is insurmountable is the love of God and the life that He has for you and I to live with Him.